Well, we made it! Welcome back to the absolute grand finale of our 15-part explainer series. We've spent the last 14 sessions unpacking the really massive, sweeping shifts coming to telemedicine coding in 2025. We've gone through the new definitions, the complex documentation rules, and that huge fundamental split between commercial CPT codes and Medicare's crosswalks. But hey, theory is one thing, right? Real-world practice is a whole different ballgame. So today, we are putting all of our 2025 telemedicine rules to the ultimate test. We're doing a deep dive into actual chart audits and coding case studies. I want you to step right into the auditor seat with me, and together, we are going to master this once and for all. Okay, so here's our final exam structure. We're going to kick things off with a couple of audio-video success cases. Then we'll learn exactly how to spot those sneaky audit red flags, navigate some audio-only tech curveballs, and we'll wrap up the whole thing with a massive 2025 rules recap. Let's get right into it.
First up on the docket, audio-video success cases.
So, synchronous, real-time video calls are basically the gold standard for telehealth. Let's look at the blueprint for getting this right. Here's case one. I want you to put your auditor hat on for a second. We have an established patient, they're at home, and the provider conducts a 30-minute synchronous video visit to manage their PTSD, major depressive disorder, and ADHD. The documentation clearly supports moderate medical decision-making. So, based on everything we've learned over this series, how exactly do you code this for a commercial payer versus Medicare?
Boom! This brilliantly illustrates the great crosswalk of 2025. For your commercial payers who are adopting the new CPT structure, you're going to use code 98006. Why? Because that code is specifically designed for a synchronous audio-video visit for an established patient requiring moderate medical decision-making. And the best part? No modifier needed. But for Medicare, it's a completely different story. Medicare assigns a status I to these new 9800 series codes. So what do? You stick to your standard office visit EM code, which is 99214, but you absolutely must append modifier 95 to explicitly say, hey, this was a synchronous audio-video service.
Okay, let's cement this with case 4. It's a very similar scenario, but we're dealing with a completely different specialty and clinical issue. The patient is established, and they've consented to a telehealth visit from home. The provider uses Doximity, which is an audio-video platform, to manage a persistent right ovarian cyst, and they spend the time discussing hormonal contraceptives to shrink it. Once again, the documentation fully supports a medically appropriate history and moderate MDM.
And the results? The coding logic doesn't budge. It remains completely rock solid. Whether you're treating ADHD or an ovarian cyst, the billing framework totally holds up. Commercial payers get CPT 9806, while Medicare demands the 99214 with modifier 95. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that regardless of the specific clinical diagnosis, your crosswalk between the new 2025 CPT codes and Medicare's legacy EM codes remains your ultimate guiding star.
All right, moving right along to spotting audit red flags.
Look, coding for success is great, but avoiding failure is where you literally save your practice from massive recoupments. Let's see if you can spot the trap here. Imagine a provider submits a super brief chart note. The patient complains of nausea and vomiting and requests a doctor's note to be excused from work. The clinical data is all there, the MDM is straightforward, but the note is completely lacking core structural metadata. Grab your auditor's red pen for a second. Do you think this would survive a 2025 audit?
Absolutely no way. Instant audit failure. The clinical decision-making honestly doesn't matter if your foundational documentation is crumbling. Look at these critical flaws. First up, missing informed consent. Nearly every payer in 2025 requires you to document that the patient actually consented to the telehealth visit, and no, not just the first time you see them, every single time. Second, missing modality. Was this an audio-video call or just a phone call? We literally can't code it if we don't know the specific technology you used. And finally, missing physical locations. You must document exactly where the patient is, like at home, and exactly where the provider is at the exact time of the encounter. Without these three pillars, your telehealth claim is just going to collapse under an auditor's scrutiny.
Next up, let's talk about navigating audio-only curveballs. Because we all know real-world medicine is messy, right? Tech fails, Wi-Fi drops, plans change on the fly. Here's case 3. We have an established patient at home who properly consents to an audio-video visit to discuss a rotator cuff MRI. The provider connects, but suddenly, the internet connection just completely drops. The video freezes, and they are forced to switch to a standard telephone call, meaning audio only. The provider spends 12 minutes on this audio-only medical discussion, resulting in moderate MDM. So how in the world do we pivot our coding for this technical failure? Okay, this is where your adaptability truly shines. Because the visit ultimately took place via audio only, you simply cannot use that 9806 audio-video code. Instead, for commercial payers, you gotta pivot to CPT code 98014. This code is explicitly carved out for a synchronous audio-only visit for an established patient requiring more than 10 minutes of medical discussion. Since our provider spent 12 minutes on the phone, it is a perfect fit. Now for Medicare, remember they still want that standard office EM code, so we stick with the 99214. But, and this is a massive but, you have to change your modifier. You can't use 95 anymore. You must use modifier 93, which specifically denotes a real-time interactive audio-only system. Master this quick pivot, and those annoying tech failures will never derail your billing again.
All right, let's bring it all home with our 2025 telemedicine rules recap.
We have honestly covered so much ground across this entire series, so let's pull the entire 2025 landscape into one ultimate cheat sheet. Lock this framework into your memory, folks. For commercial CPT, you're using the brand new 9800 through 98016 series, which is split perfectly between audio-video and audio-only. And because the codes themselves describe the technology, you don't need any modifiers. For Medicare, because they designate those new CPTs as status I, you have to rely on the standard Office EM codes, which means strict compliance with your modifiers, 93 for audio-only and 95 for audio-video. On top of that, Medicare requires precise place of service codes, POS 0 of 2 if the patient is not at home, and POS 10 if they are. Embed this exact logic into your daily workflow, and I promise you will navigate 2025 with total confidence.
And finally, our wrap-up. You have officially survived the trial by fire. From definitions and documentation rules to completely mastering the nuances between commercial codes and Medicare crosswalks, you have absolutely conquered the sweeping 2025 telemedicine changes. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible 15-part journey. Your dedication to learning this stuff ensures better outcomes for your practices and, most importantly, for your patients. But, as telehealth technology continues to evolve way faster than policy ever could, it leaves me with one final question for you. Will these 2025 rules become the permanent gold standard, or are they just a messy stepping stone toward a completely virtual healthcare system by 2030? Stay curious, keep that documentation airtight, and remember, decode healthcare with Harshal.